was kind enough to contact me, and we had a nice little chat, and he was telling me about some of the things that he was passionate about and some of the things that this group was passionate about. So thank you all for attending, and I hope that we'll have some sort of dialogue as to what we can do that would probably benefit, like the bishop said, the diocese and the church in India as well. So with regard to the economy of Francesco, it is a movement currently. Now, essentially, it didn't start out being a movement. This was a 3-day event convened by Pope Francis, and it was sponsored by the Vatican Dicastery for Promoting Integral Development. That was the department that sponsored this. And its mission was really to enter into a covenant to change today's economy and to give a soul to the economy of tomorrow. That was its stated mission. And initially, it was visualized as a 3-day meeting of young people from universities and businesses and organizations who might be interested in creating new understandings of the economy and of progress, etc. Now, the ultimate aim of the economy of Francesco was to suggest theoretical underpinnings. So there was a theoretical component to it, and also some tangible proposals that can be disseminated as a sort of idea for a different kind of economy. And in the words of Pope Francis, what he was looking for was an economy that brings life, not death, one that is inclusive and not exclusive, humane and not dehumanizing, one that cares for the environment and does not despoil it. So this was the stated vision and the stated mission. Now, what happened over time was that, as you all know, the pandemic. So originally conceived as a one-time 3-day event in Assisi, due to the COVID pandemic, it was postponed from March of this year when it was originally going to be held. And then it was first postponed, visualized as a 3-day event in November 2020. But then, as you know, that had to be, shelved too. And so we did have an event in November 2020, but that was an online event. But in the meantime, since by the time the 3-day event in March was cancelled, there was just about 2 or 3 weeks. So everything had already been set into motions. And so it bought the organizers and the participants a few months. And what happened was the economy evolved spontaneously from a one-time event to a movement of the same young specialists. And what happened is over the last 4 or 5 months, we worked virtually, we exchanged, collaborated virtually through brainstorming with our groups and subgroups that we will talk about. And there were also workshops with dialogues with experts. And we worked in 12 subgroups. So this was done in the respective subgroups. And then the entire idea was that Pope Francis would join the participants at 2 events. One has already occurred. That was from the 19th to the 21st of November 2020. That was entirely online. And in the second event, which hopefully will be around this time next year in November 2021, the Pope would like to receive the participants face-to-face in Assisi, Italy, where he originally intended to meet everybody. So what has happened is that we have bought time, in some sense, the pandemic bought time for it to evolve from a one-time event to a movement. And the way that I got involved is essentially, I was looking through the invitation of the Pope. Like I was sharing with Professor Agnelo, this was quite serendipitous. Okay, I found out about it from a friend of mine who I'd met at another conference, and he told me about it. And then I read the invitation to researchers. There was a special invitation to researchers by the Pope and by the Economy of Francesco Scientific Committee. And then it seemed like much of my research and management would fall into the kind of work they would be interested in. And in some sense, it gave me a kind of framework to make sense or to integrate the research I had done. So I applied under the researcher category. You had to apply, and then the researcher application had a whole lot of things like you had to speak about your theoretical underpinnings, your methodology, your results, and how you will contribute to a new economy if you had to contribute. And that's how I was accepted. I was gearing up to attend the event in March, but then when it evolved to a virtual collaboration model, I got to interact with other researchers who've done similar work to me. And this was very stimulating for me intellectually, because for about 5 to 6 months, I got to work with these people, trying to kind of see where we can contribute to something bigger than ourselves, but also bigger than our local context, country context, and so on. So that sort of drew me in more and more.
Caren, could you tell us about your career trajectory and how this fits into this kind of a movement?
Right. So my career trajectory, well, quite frankly, I am now currently assistant professor at St. Joseph's Institute of Management, Bangalore. Before this, I did my doctorate in IIM Bangalore, and
your topic was?
My topic was actually expatriate issues in organizations, but what I dealt with was linguistic ostracism. So how expatriates might be excluded by language, not just the absence of knowledge in a particular language, but also the way they speak. So for example, your accent can exclude. You don't understand the small talk people are making. You don't understand colloquial expressions. That excludes. And how that actually affects work outcomes in organizations. So that was my dissertation. And a lot of my research does have some sort of underpinnings in three broad categories. The first broad area is corporate social responsibility, where I study corporate social responsibility, but not really in terms of the activities that are done, but more in terms of the target groups. That is, who the activities are targeted towards, which disadvantaged groups is it being targeted to, and who is being excluded. So that was one broad area. The other deals with urban informal sector workers and the issues they face. I examine, I'm sure all of you all are all experts in your field. You will be dealing with it from your own lenses. I deal with it from a management perspective, from a business and management lens. And the third, like I just mentioned, was research connected with exclusion in organizations. My specialization is organizational behavior and human resource management. So how are employees discriminated against in organizations? How does this affect their outcomes? All of that. So these were the three broad areas that sort of fit in to the themes that the Economy of Francesco was trying to address, and that kind of inspired me to apply and get accepted.
What did you write about before you tell us about the dynamics of the movement?
Right.
What was your contribution
to the Economy of Francesco? Well, yes. If I may, I will share a slide because that makes it sort of easier to understand. So let me just. Just a minute. I'm sorry.
You got the sharing rights, no?
Yes, I do. I just need to sort of make my screen full screen.
Yeah.
Let me just share my screen. Okay. So this diagram sort of makes it easier to understand what I was doing. So essentially, human resource management to me, I see a lot of rhetoric in human resource management that has paid lip service to very lofty ideas like, employee growth, employee empowerment, and so on. But in practice, the exercises that I have seen in HRM, they continue to perpetuate an unfair exchange in which, as you can see in the diagram, the organization accrues far more benefits than the employee. Now, given that the COVID-19 pandemic as far as the HR field is concerned, has been the most disruptive force since World War II. Um, uh, there were other forces that threatened to kind of disrupt the HR model, artificial intelligence, etc. But these were far slower than expected. But the COVID-19 pandemic actually forced organizations to do things differently. And in that context, what I did was, over the summer, I examined the HRM related actions of around 200 national governments and 600 large companies, as well as, interviews with employees and managers here in India and outside. And the research helped me to capture new perspectives about what we have gained about HR from the pandemic. So, how institutional characteristics are affecting HR philosophy, how the pandemic is being used as an excuse to exploit workers in some cases, virtual work, of course, and how virtual work actually affects organizational productivity. Does it do it for the better, for the worse, etc.? And while my research was currently ongoing, it's in the analysis stage. It helped me to say, okay, fine, this is the route I'm going. These are the things that I feel can help kind of present to you a new HRM model with HRM practices that would not be exploitative to employees, but probably create economic value for organizations, because otherwise, why do organizations want employees? While truly serving as a gift to employees. So the lower scale that you can see in the diagram, the balanced scale. So this will benefit employees, of course, but also it does offer organizations in future, if there are disruptive economic or social crises, a way to deal with employees and so on. So that was my contribution. It was essentially in the researcher subgroup of the management umbrella. So that was where my contribution was.
And just to refresh our memories,
yes.
What are the ways in which the organization benefits more than the employees? And then how do you negate that?
Well, the organization, see, in classic, you have the entire principal, agent, theory, principal and agent. And the entire philosophy behind HRM is that, the agent is going to.
If you could tell the group what is agent and principal. No?
All right. So essentially, the idea of principal agent theory from a HR perspective, and not really from other perspectives, from a HR perspective, is that you have a principal. The principal here would be the organization, and the agent here would be the employees. Now, the owner, the organization, or the owners of the organization, the shareholders, etc. If it's a family business, the owner, they cannot do all the work in the organization, and therefore they entrust the agents or the employees to do the work. But the idea is that relationship is fraught with distrust, in the sense that the principal believes that the agent is going to cheat. Okay, cheat how? Cheat in terms of, from a HR perspective, again, that they will slack off. Okay, that if they don't, that they will try to work less than optimally, etc. And so the idea from a HR perspective is that the organization should make sure that they get more out of the employee than what they give the employee. A classic financial balance sheet. You should get more than what you give to the employee. And for a long time, this hasn't even been questioned. And then whenever it has been questioned, organizations come back with ideas like, all right, let's talk about, helping you with your career. Or let's talk about work-life balance and things like this. And these sound great on paper. It sounds great on paper, but if you actually look at something like work-life balance, even the so-called best organization is supposed to be based in Europe, hiring white-collared workers and so on. The way that work-life balance practices are actually administered in organizations continue to be discriminatory towards certain groups. They continue to discriminate against women of childbearing age. They continue to discriminate against people of an immigrant background. And so you have this classic principal agent problem, where there is a lot of lip service paid to, we value our employees and we do this and we do that, etc. But in truth, it is unbalanced. So is there a kind of way where we can cause it to balance? There is a role for governments here to play as well. And there is a role for, of course, the organization to play as well. So that is roughly the problem in which my research was sitting.
And are you bringing about a systemic change? Like what I'm looking at when you balance it out, are you talking about socialism, or are you saying this model yet works in capitalism? Because that would be something that you can present in a movement. Huh?
Yes, because see, the idea about socialism is that in general, I think if you're going to have a pure socialist movement, we do not have a model anywhere of it being widely accepted in the West or anywhere else. And most organizations post the fall of, most countries, I'm sorry, post the fall of the USSR have moved to some blend of capitalism. So I do believe that there is a possibility of us to continue to work in that capitalist model, where organizations can encourage innovations, you have healthy competition, all of that, and capitalism could bring about individual growth. If individual growth, you reward people for their talent, etc. So we're not going into the entire purely into socialism. However, ideas from socialism of the importance of the worker, of work-life balance. These are things that will have to be borrowed from maybe classic socialism. So we will have some things borrowed from socialism, but no, I wouldn't be presenting a purely socialist model. Partly because I believe in some virtues of the free market, and also partially because you have to be practical, and when you present something, it has to resonate with the organizations who are going to listen to it, to the international agencies who are going to resonate with it, and so on.
And can we go into those villages that you were talking in terms of the dynamics?
Sure. Just to give all of you a brief idea of what we're talking about now, it's the villages. Now, the thing about the economy of Francesco was, I was only part of the management subgroup. And that's really a small part, 1/12, you could say, of what the entire movement was all about. So we had, the way the economy of Francesco was organized was, you're talking about a new economy. You can't do it, with one set of experts in one field. So you need a variety of fields to do it with. And so the way they conceptualized it was, let me share my screen again. They conceptualized it in terms of 12 villages. They call them villages. The villages are essentially subgroups. So they conceptualize it in terms of 12 villages. And I would like to spend some time, because I know many of you all are from different backgrounds. So, you get a sense of, from your own areas, the kind of things that the economy of Francesco discussed about. So each of these boxes that you can see on the screen, they signify one of the main focus areas of the economy of Francesco. And these were the subgroups. Within each subgroup is where the brainstorming occurred for the last 6 months or so. And then you had what you call the one big idea from each of these villages presented. So let me just go into them one by one. Finance and humanity. The entire
Caren, as you go, just a minute, as you go through it, I don't know whether everyone has noticed it. There is a commercial aspect and there's a human value aspect.
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah, sure.
I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah. That was actually done deliberately. So if you look at the themes, there's what is going on now in some sense, and then there's the second word is the paradox, and they're somehow trying to bridge what is going on now with what might seem like counterintuitive sometimes, or the paradox sometimes, and see whether that can be incorporated. For example, finance and humanity. Finance has got a bad name since 2008, right? So the idea is there something, what this village, what this subgroup was debating about is there something called good capital? And if there is something called good capital, how do you restore trust in the traditional finance and investment sector? And how do you get that sector to make finance more inclusive, make it, like the name says, work in the service of humanity and not necessarily against 99% of it? And then you have work and care, work for organizations, but is there a way that this work, can you reconceptualize it in such a way that it also honors the responsibility to care for the employees, to respect employees, and not just employees, but really all of creation, including the environment, etc. And then you have agriculture and justice. Agriculture is currently being practiced amidst a lot of challenges, climate change being one of them, but also, the world's growing population, pressure on resources, land conflicts, which are increasing in many parts of the world. And agriculture has to meet these challenges as well as also incorporate ideas like worker rights, right to water, for example, and a lot of other things. So that was the agriculture and justice village. Then there was the energy and poverty village. There is largely a consensus, at least in the developed world, that you need to migrate eventually, from the entire oil economy. But is there a way? So what this village actually spoke about is there a way to transition in such a way that poor people benefit from this energy transition to a renewable energy transition, or are they going to foot the bill? So that was what the energy poverty village spoke about. There was business and peace, the idea about whether it is possible, we just spoke about it, can a well-functioning market actually be an antidote to conflict? Friedman's sort of, it's become a saying almost that two countries with a McDonald's don't go to war against each other, right? So in some sense, they were exploring that part, functioning market, well-functioning market, and markets across countries. If there's good trade, can that be an antidote to conflict? And also, of course, the very prevalent idea as to the role that big companies play in encouraging conflict, or perhaps hopefully in preventing it. And so that was business and peace. Women for economy, the idea there was solely on women. Can you come up with new organizational models? Can you come up with new styles of governance, inclusion, work-life balance, all of this in women for economy? CO2 and inequalities really had nothing to do with CO2. It was about inequalities. Can you talk about the etiology of inequalities? Because there are economic inequalities, but they're often caused by or cause other inequalities like educational achievement or democratic power, human rights, all of that. And then can you imagine an economic system without these inequalities? Vocation and profit was, can you build a workplace or an economic system where people can find their calling, where people can find their vocation? And if you're going to respect individual vocation, how does respecting individual vocation sort of play into meeting our common goals, like the sustainable development goals, etc.? Or how will individual vocations go hand in hand with the mission or vision of a corporation, for example? So that was vocation and profit. Businesses in transition looked at the fact that businesses were in transition, either because of the environmental crisis or technology innovation or social changes. But given that they're undergoing this transition, how can they make the transition in such a way that they include the poor, they include the most vulnerable? And then there was life and lifestyle. So about lifestyle as you and I live it, and whether there was a more responsible sort of lifestyle possible in terms of responsible consumption, responsible production, combating waste, all of this. Policies and happiness is something which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Is there a way of measuring the impact of policy in terms of happiness from macro and microeconomic perspectives? And then management and gift, which I was a part of. And here the challenge was to examine what management is currently, transactional relationship between organization and the various stakeholders, and was there any way in which this could be changed? Obviously, the idea is you have some kind of gratuitous management. CSR is often spoken about as gratuitous management, and we looked at it and said, is this indeed possible? or is it always going to be laced with some hidden agendas? So this was a broad idea of all of the work and all of the subgroups that engaged at the Economy of Francesco, each of them having done the same ideas of brainstorming, etc., for about 5 or 6 months. Just to also let you know, when we say people were in these subgroups, each subgroup had a further three subdivisions. So you had to apply. All of the participants had applied in 2019 and they were accepted. So all of them had to submit applications. There were three categories you could apply to: research, which is what I applied to. There was also a business category, that was entrepreneurs and managers. And then there was a category for other change makers, that might be, grassroots level workers, etc., who might be promoting activities that serve what we call, the common good. Essentially, are they promoting a just, sustainable economy? So within each of these villages, there were these three subgroups working sometimes independently and sometimes integrating across to get viewpoints. So that,
So are the doors shut now? Can anybody else come inside? Can anybody join these?
No. The Economy of Francesco, so the applications opened out somewhere in the middle of 2019. And then they said they got thousands of applications from around 120 countries. It was not limited to religion or nationality, etc. Each of the categories were examined by different expert committees. And so as of now, by the end of 2019, because remember, they were planning for a March 3-day event. So by the end of 2019, acceptance letters had gone out and so on. So this, in terms of anybody joining, no, it is currently those 2,000 delegates who were already chosen. So that is where it stands today.
How is it a movement? How is it an ongoing process if new thoughts, new ideas cannot be brought inside? Is the engagement yet opened? You can engage with me and you can take my thoughts.
Yes. So yes. So people are encouraged, for example. So for example, as delegates, we are encouraged to sort of engage with the people around us and take back these ideas. So they call them Economy of Francesco events. So you can have these dialogues with people, just like how I'm having with you.
Okay.
Listen to your ideas, listen to your feedback, and take it back. And this was not encouraged just from now. It was encouraged right from the beginning. That's what participants were encouraged to do. So yes, so that's how it feeds back into this movement. The other thing to remember also is that this is just, in my opinion, this is just one of the many kind of streams that Pope Francis is setting into motion. So this little bit is about the youth. And you all know about, the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, that was also sort of brought into birth in SSC, the same place where the Economy of Francesco was supposed to be held, and will hopefully be held next year. So I think there are a number of streams. This one's for the youth. There are probably going to be a number of other streams opened out for different parts, not just of the church. They're open to a whole lot of other religions, etc., for people to take part in.
So which Francis are we talking about? Saint Francis or Pope Francis, or because
Yes.
every time you're going back to Assisi, no?
Yes, we're talking about Assisi a lot, and this is something that is very interesting. You all know that Pope Francis was a Jesuit pope, right? In some sense, he was originally a Jesuit. He took the name of Francis of Assisi when he took over the papacy. The idea was, if you look at a lot of his work now, Laudato Si. So that also starts with the first paragraph itself harkens back to Francis of Assisi. Where is he launching or wanted to launch the Economy of Francesco from Assisi? Fratelli Tutti launched from Assisi. So Pope Francis wants to root his papacy in St. Francis of Assisi's life and teaching. Why? Because for one thing, Francis of Assisi, he in Pope Francis's own words, he changed history. That's what Pope Francis believes, and he changed history. How? He changed history in a couple of ways. He sort of predated the Reformation inside the church, but also in his time, he stood up against the luxury, the pride, the vanity of both the civil and the church powers of the time. So very similar to the aims of the current pope in terms of, standing up for climate change, standing up for a new economy, etc. St. Francis, as you know, you must have read about him, served the lepers, sick, the poor, basically the disadvantaged people of his time. Also, he believed that people should be in communion with nature and not in conflict with it. So our Pope Francis, he visualizes a very radical reconceptualization of the economy, that it should work for all people, it should work for disadvantaged people, it should work for developing countries. He specifically said that it should be in harmony with nature, much like that Saint Francis of Assisi and his philosophy hundreds of years ago.
Is there a conflict of interest over the sacred versus the secular? Is there some kind of a conflict, or is it dogmatic? Is it highly Christian?
Has it been dogmatic? I would say no, and I will tell you why. So one of the things that I already mentioned was that it was the application was open and specifically said, even if if you are from another religion, please join in. Please join in. So it is a secular movement. It has actively solicited participation of young people and also experts, the expert speakers or the experts who came to mentor the students. They were from different religions and different religious viewpoints. The idea was that they roughly have the same economic aims, that we do have something going wrong with our economic idea now. And Professor Agnelo said, was it dogma driven? No, I wouldn't consider it dogma driven at all. Because in the months that I worked with the other participants, as well as in Assisi, I did not hear anything about dogma. And the conversation was very deliberately kept inclusive. Of course, there might be elements of Catholic social teaching. There might be Catholic ideas about the environment driving the movement, but the focus is really on a secular, inclusive, ecumenical kind of rethink of the economy. So, just to give you an example, Jeffrey Sachs, he was one of the mentors of.
You could tell them who is Jeffrey Sachs, no?
Right. So Jeffrey Sachs, Jeffrey Sachs actually is known for very different things. So he's considered one of the biggest thinkers in economics, etc. In fact, he has advocated for the widespread dissemination of birth control, right, to reduce population growth in order to bring about sustainable development, etc. He is one of the mentors of the Economy of Francesco, and there was a little whisper of discontent about that. And in fact, cardinals came out and said, you know what, in terms of the economy, we need him to speak. And he's willing to come and speak. So I'm sure the church might not agree with some of his ideas, but he has other very important economics-based contributions to make.
He does a lot of work in Africa also, no?
Yes. But like I said, there are some I'm not even sure of what his religious affiliation is. But what is? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm not sure of his religious affiliation, but I do know that he's a very vocal advocate, like I said, of some things that the church might not generally support, but it does not really prevent them from engaging with him. So no, I don't think it's dogmatic at all. At least currently, it's not.
Caren, when you said the cooperative principles,
right?
Is it cooperates versus cooperation? Is one of them going to be subdued? Is one of them going to engulf the other?
Yeah. See, the idea is, well, as far as the Economy of Francesco is concerned, we have some corporates like Aeon Oil and Energy, they have actively sponsored parts of the Economy of Francesco. They've taken part in the Economy of Francesco. So I think in some sense, the Economy of Francesco accepted not just the Jeffrey Sachs of the world, but also CEOs who said, fine, we want to look at some way in which we can transform ourselves. And if you look at if you think back on the villages that I just put up on that slide there, some villages, so for example, like Management Village or Business and Peace, they might almost exclusively be talking to corporates. However, there was a big presence of cooperatives in the sense that some of them were there present, but also in terms of the scholars and what they were studying, or the participants and the backgrounds they had come from. So there was a big contribution of cooperatives and also new entrepreneurial ventures, because at some level there is an idea that cooperatives and entrepreneurships have been nimbler in incorporating these ideas of inclusiveness, sustainability, etc., into their operations. So, so I think there is an attempt to bring about some kind of synthesis, in the sense that, is it possible to examine how big corporates can possibly think or act smaller, like cooperatives or like entrepreneurships might.
Would that bring about the balance that you were talking about, no? Your motive of imbalance and balance.
Yes, because there are ideas that one can borrow from a few entrepreneurial ventures that have, that are set up especially for women with very young children, for example. And how do they manage to still be profitable when a big corporation says, no, this is not possible? So yes, so that is what they're trying to look
at. There's a question from Virginia Saldana. Sure. And she says, Caren, do you take into consideration the various intersectionalities of exclusion, like politics, religious rights, exclusion of Dalits, non-binary persons, and so on and so forth?
If you're asking about my personal research,
wait, let's ask Virginia whether she's asking the personal research.
Yes.
Virginia, are you asking about the personal research, or are you asking about the movement? Virginia? Virginia, if you can unmute and talk to us. Bishop, can we get Virginia on board? Because otherwise, okay, I don't know what you would be answering.
Yeah, I can more or less answer.
Do it both ways, yes.
My research really dealt with expatriates. So as far as considering Dalits, non-binary persons, this was not something that I took into account in my research. So that would be the short answer. Did I consider various sectionalities of exclusion? The things that I did consider, because this was done across countries, the intersectionalities I did consider were ideas of gender, of the state of life they're in. So are they married? Are they single? Do they have children? But the main one that I considered was race. In terms of is there some kind of intersectionality between your linguistic ability and your race? So let's say if you're from Germany and you speak with an accent, are you still possibly respected? Whereas if you're from another country, let's say China, and you have an accent, what is the discrimination there?
Okay. And in the movement,
yeah,
would such intersectionalities be considered?
Yes, I think in the movement they spoke about it in detail, because there were several villages that looked at it. Work and care was one, and also inequalities. And Virginia has specifically asked me about non-binary persons. This was something taken up in the movement, not by me, by other researchers, and by other people who are working with them, working with these non-binary individuals in probably more conservative environments, Paraguay, and so on, and how they are creating, this was again an entrepreneurship, how they're creating opportunities for these people to live a life of dignity.
Bishop is asking whether it's an utopia. Are we creating a virtual world? Are we creating an imaginative world? Can it work in the real world?
Yes, so that's a very pertinent question, because the idea was, we're talking about all of this. Is it just building castles in the air? And that is why in the last session, they had what was called life economists, right? So they had life economists, and they said, we're going to choose one big idea from each village. And when we were taking part in that, they said, when you address this, you have to address it and say, all right, national governments, can you do this, right? or international agencies, UN, ILO, etc. Can you do this? So there has been an attempt to translate the ideas, because that was one part, to come up with new ideas, to come up with a new philosophy. But there's also been a very deliberate attempt to convert those ideas into tangible proposals. Currently, it is just one per village. Going forward, I would expect quite a few more, right? Because like you said, you Grace, otherwise it's just, we're talking about, having all of these wonderful ideas and so on, but does it really work out in ground reality? So they did have this. They were called life economists, and they deliberately told all of us, when you talk to an international, ask, say, what are the one or two things you want them to do? So that's how it was conceptualized.
Caren, just to take this, what Bishop asked and your answer to his logical conclusion,
sure.
Is there a rubrics for success? Are you going to measure? Is there a schedule that says pause, let's see how we are going, and then take it forward? Is there a review time?
Yes, I am not very sure of how long that time is, but there certainly is the idea that we've had this entire online event. Like I said, for 5 or 6 months, people were working on their proposals, and then there was a narrowing down to the 3 best proposals in the village, and then from the best proposals, further narrowing down one proposal uh, that from each village that would move the economy of Francesco.
How do you narrow down without being competitive? How do you narrow it down without being competitive?
Well, see, that is something that I think, the organizing committee did. So there was an organizing committee. So it wasn't really completely youth driven. So the participants were all young people, but there was an organizing committee to sort of decide, okay, which ones show the most promise, which ones shall we take forward now? It wasn't to say that the other proposals are never going to be taken into consideration at all in future, but for now, for the online event, they wanted 12 proposals to run with, and so on. And so what we were told is, in the coming weeks, and maybe now, with the entire problems in Italy, this may have slowed down a bit, but in the coming weeks, they would present the tangible proposals, sit down and see how they're being accepted, and sort of kind of take stock again of the entire situation, so that by the actual meeting next year, they will have evaluated, okay, how did these proposals go, and where do we go from here?
Okay, so the choice of viability and the choice of consensus is like a success rubrics. No? We have not made it competitive, and yet we are using the best ones first. Okay?
Yes.
And maybe the best ones could be the leader. Could that be an idea that could come up over there?
Yes, and like I said, that was done by an organizing committee, not really by participants sort of competitively trying to push out other people's ideas.
Yeah. And what would you say about the church? What could we do across the country, not just any particular diocese?
Right.
How do we take this movement forward? How do we put it into practice so that we can say, here's a working model?
Right. See, the idea is, for one thing, there are 12 villages, so there are a lot of ideas to borrow from. In addition to these 12 tangible proposals that I just spoke about, there were also broad resolutions in terms of, they are still in the theoretical stage currently, but really 12 broad resolutions, again constructed by the organizing committee, that abstracted away, integrated across the villages. These are ideas that they mean to come about. Now, these 12 ideas, for example, might be relevant in different situations in India. Some of them may be relevant across countries. So my instinct would be, the Economy of Francesco is one such event that has given rise to these 12 ideas, or these 12. There are also various committees in the church that work on ecology in every diocese, right? You have a committee on ecology, you have a committee on education, you have a committee for social causes, like all of you are. So I think the idea of Pope Francis is to put these conceptualizations out here. And if we can read through the 12 resolutions and say, fine, maybe this particular thing is relevant to us in our archdiocese, or it could be much smaller than, in our archdiocese, it could be in the Vincent de Paul Society in our parish, is there any way that we can ensure, we give money, but is there any way where we can ensure that work-life balance of the people that we are giving money to is taken care of? I don't know how much that is done already.
Are you in conversation with your diocese in Agnelo?
No, actually, I think Bishop Allwyn got a head start. So no, no, I have not yet. See, this
and in St. Joseph's College of Management.
St. Joseph's College, yes. So they have told me, you know, however I would like to take it forward, they're willing to sit down and talk. And you know, and we have other colleges and institutes as well. So again, it might not necessarily be my work, or it need not necessarily be what I have done or my proposal, or even related to management. It could be something else. For example, with regard to reduction of waste, something that came out of the Life and Lifestyle Village. You know, is there a way to, in a college setup, to promote that? Now, that is something that all of us can do. You know, it doesn't require, it's not like another proposal which says, okay, let's reconceptualize you know, the IMF or the World Bank, right? That is a project for, it has its place. That's a project for someone else. But locally, so like I said, Vincent de Paul societies or colleges, like we have Catholic colleges, can we think of some
even
idea
schools, huh? Can even schools catch them young?
Yeah, even schools. I mean, reduction of waste in terms of, yes, you know, the waste generated by the college, but also in terms of our consumption. And in some sense, I think the pandemic, I presented the proposal for management and gift, and there was this excellent young man from Rwanda. He was from the Life and Lifestyle. He represented the Life and Lifestyle village, and he was talking to me, and he said, you know, this entire COVID pandemic has actually made us as a world rethink consumption. Because earlier, developed countries, we say developed countries, but in some sense, even pockets of developed, you know, middle class people, all of us, we had got used to the idea of waste. We had got used to the idea of, you know, splurging on clothing and things like that. And he said, after the pandemic came about, people realized they don't need more than 3 shirts and 2 pants. You know, because of course it's with Zoom calls and everything. But can we reconceptualize how much we're consuming and what we're consuming as people, as institutes, as youth groups, and try and see where we can reduce waste? Because all of this, you know, it can be done at the grassroots also. It's not just big ideas. There are big ideas, sure, but they're not all big ideas. Work-life balance, like I said, a huge issue. What about the people that we are supporting through the various agencies that we have, Vincent de Paul, Legion of Mary, etc.? How much are we taking this into account when distributing aid or and so on? So these are some of the things I think. Take the proposals and see, you know, one little thing in your own space, where you can sort of implement in your own context. I think that would be the takeaway.
And since Rwanda, I'm looking at that as a metaphor for the slum areas that we work in. Look at the backward areas that parishes work in, and so on and so forth. Was the representation across the world very fair? A lot of Latin Americans, Central America?
No, and I would have raised that point as well. And this was not my observation. The organizing committee themselves said that they felt that South America and Africa specifically were underrepresented. So they acknowledged that, and they said that they have to go back and see what they can do about it, because these are large sections of humanity. Many of them are quite poor, and therefore, in some sense, the people that we're supposed to think about, right? And there wasn't much of representation. And you said Rwanda was the metaphor, and it is so powerful because, you know, people that are coming from these countries, many of them have grown up among war, amidst war. Many of these people are trying to rebuild new societies. So for them, of course, it is very relevant to even countries like India, but for them, it is far more powerful because they're literally building up a country from scratch. and trying to get these ideas about what sort of an economy should we have, how should we look at the climate, how and this young man told me he was just a sportsman, and now he's working for the government, he's trying to do something. So so the idea was, those countries probably most need the economy of Francesco, but uh, they have to do something about the representation because they did not get. Part of the reason could be about language barriers, maybe, right? And also, of course, did they get the information, all of that.
So, and as you come to the end,
Yes.
I'm when Bishop is asking you this question,
right?
Are you ready to light a fire under the seats of these bishops and the church?
Am
You're
I?
all sitting down, yeah? Are you ready to do that? No? Or is this, was it an asymmetry of information? I mean, it looks like they do not have this kind of information. So are you ready to light that fire under their seat?
Well, I can talk to them. I think lighting the fire would probably have to come from Bishop Allwyn. So, yeah, I'm sure.
What kind of an idea are you talking in terms of? If you have to talk to this, the entire set of bishops and the church in India?
If I have to talk to them, what I would do is present those 12 proposals to them, just like what I said here. 12, because I can't go to a bishop in Jharkhand and say, you do this, right? I don't know.
Suggestive. You're suggesting. You're opening up avenues here.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would put these ideas in front of them and say, fine, these are the ideas the Economy of Francesco has come up with. Do you think any of them are relevant to your context? Do you think you can realistically put? It could be one. For some people, it could be more than one. So I would not presume to tell them what to do, but I can. But I would be willing to share what happened there. Put up an outline and say, what do you think? Yeah.
I was talking more in terms of the sharing.
Yes.
Because you've got into it. You've got the spirit of it. Can you share it with more youth? No? Can the church become a little more vibrant because of what you are? What you are doing. Okay.
Yeah.
Bishop, it's 8 o'clock. You're muted.
Yeah, we can go on, but I think you have sort of animated us, at least animated me, so that I can hopefully animate the bishops also. I'm a small fry in the bishops' conference, but I think this is very important. I think we need to rethink and to rethink our economy, our practices in the church. And so I think you have given us a good summary of the Economy of Francesco. Hopefully we'll be in touch and we'll spread this message. I would like to thank Professor Agnelo and also Caren for their contribution. And hopefully we'll meet again.
Yes. It was a pleasure.
Caren, you have the last word. Virginia wants to know whether you've written a report.
Did I write a report? No, but my research is in the process of getting published. So I'm essentially a researcher, right? So that's the path trajectory I'm going to be taking, peer review, all of that. And so that's what I'm going to do. Virginia, I did notice that you weren't showing up, so you were disconnected, I think. I'd be happy to connect with you. You said you were asking in the movement. I'd actually shared it. I said that in the movement there were certainly addressed all kinds of inequalities, including non-binary persons, especially in poorer areas, poorer countries, and there were entrepreneurships that catered to them, and these were some of the issues that came up in the movement. So, yes.
And Sister Mudita says, Bishop, you can whisper. I would say shout aloud. Stand on the rooftops and shout about what Caren is saying.
Wonderful. I will also. Yeah.
Don't whisper because the Chinese whisper distorts.
At least start whispering.
No, well, I do think that there are a lot of, I can share the experience from Bangalore. A lot of bishops have been doing a lot of this good work. In fact, when our local, what we call the BBMP here, I think you'll call it the BMC there, your municipal corporation, they wanted to do a survey on homeless people. How many homeless people are there in the city? And then they realized they did not have access. They asked the bishop, so essentially the the diocese, to do the project for them, and they were quite happy. And this is not something that the bishop has spoken about to us or anything like that. This came through the newspapers, that the bishop kind of spearheaded it. He visited a lot of, he took part in the survey, because you have to go in the nights to find a lot of these homeless people. That's when they take shelter under bridges and so on. So that entire thing was conducted by the Bangalore Archdiocese for the government. So there are many people of goodwill out there. I think the economy of Francesco, essentially all of these ideas sort of serve to integrate everything into one umbrella. Yeah.
Bishop Allwyn, when he was a priest, works in one of the back poor areas of Mumbai. Jerry Mary and all, remember Bishop Allwyn? Somebody is asking for a contact with you. Would you be able to share that, or
sure.
Is it too personal?
I can share my email ID with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just type it out here. So
Caren.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on the.
Yes, I've shared it. I've shared it.
Yeah. Sister Mudita, you got it now? It's in the, what do they call that? Notes or chat. So thank you, Caren.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for being there. Okay.
Thank you. It was a lovely 1 hour I had.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Agnelo. Professor Agnelo has actually been driving this for the last few days as well. So we've got to talk a lot, and it's been wonderful. So thank you, Professor Agnelo, and of course, thank you, Your Grace, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Bishop Allwyn.
Thank you, Caren and Agnelo.
Thank you, Bishop Allwyn.
Thank you, sister. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caren. Thank you, Agnelo.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Caren, I'll leave. Huh?
Yes.